Congresswoman Schakowsky has to leave, and she was kind enough to make time for us, despite us having 4 or 5 different things going on, particularly given that it's 9/11. So the sooner we get going, the better off we are. So my name is Fayaz Hussain. I'm here on behalf of the Muslim Public Affairs Council. I was going to write down a few notes, etc., but because of last-minute issues, we were including rain and Zoom issues and everything else. I literally have no speaker's notes, but I have thought through many times what I want to say. So inshallah, hope it all is cohesive, sounds logical, and I hope I don't mess up in a big way, but it's okay. We're all in this together. We'll do our best. I'd like to first invite a Hafiz Suleiman Abdullah to kick off our festivities with a short ayah from the Quran, including a translation. So Suleiman, where are you? Come on up.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. O humankind, we have created you from male and female, and we have made you nations and tribes so that you may get to know each other. Verily, the noblest amongst you in the eyes of God is the most righteous. God is all-knowing, all-aware.
Thank you, Suleiman. Given that it's 9/11, it's the 21st anniversary of the terrorist attacks, I think we should start with just a brief moment of silence in commemoration of the innocent lives that were lost on our soil. So you can join me for a quick remembrance. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge our global war on terror and what innocent lives have been lost all over the world, and the collateral damage, the true innocents out there as well, who unfortunately have perished by the thousands. So let's take a quick moment to reflect on that and also remember them as well. Thank you. I thought it was important for us to start with remembering both sets of innocents who have died, particularly because the Quranic ayah that was just read, for those of you who've heard this before and those of our non-Muslim friends who have not heard this before, it talks about how God has created us from one, in essence, being Adam and Eve, and in essence multiplied us across the lands in order that we get to know each other. That's the pronouncement that's come from God Almighty. But unfortunately, the history of our lives has shown that it's been nothing but a lot of wars, destruction, etc. And we thought this particular ayah was extremely relevant given our topic today, because what we're trying to do here really to impact our Muslim Public Affairs Council's democracy series around the world, around the US, inshallah, I hope we go around the world, is to really bring to light what we all need to be doing as American citizens, as American Muslims, to help bridge this bipartisan divide that's becoming greater by each and every day. So we are holding a similar series we've already done it in Washington, D.C. at a law firm, at a multinational law firm. We had a great audience attendance there. Ro Khanna was a congressman out of California, came to speak out there. We are doing this in Houston. We're talking about voting access, voting rights. We're doing it in Atlanta. And Chicago is I would say, one of our bigger events. We had a lot of people registered, but because of the rain, a lot of people have converted over to Zoom. So I'll start off by really thanking you all for coming, because you guys are the diehards. One of the people who texted me about 40 minutes ago saying they're stranded in some flood watch, which is all legit, but they couldn't make it and you guys did. So it really shows that you guys care about this issue, you're here to support. And some of you may have also come to see Salam Mariati, who's the president of MPAC, but unfortunately he had shoulder surgery and couldn't make it, so I'm his substitute. He's a much better speaker, much better looking, everything under the sun, but unfortunately he can't make it and he's just sending his best wishes to you all. I'd like to start off with Congressman, again, Jan Schakowsky. I'll do the speaker introductions to the panelists a bit later. The way the program's going to flow is Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky is going to give her opening remarks, and then we're going to then immediately go to Brother Muqtadar to welcome you all on behalf of our partners who helped us put this together, and then I'll be back to introduce the speakers one by one. We're going to have Sadia Sindhu go first, and I'll do a proper introduction in just a minute. Zina Rahman, excuse me. I was about to say Zinat Aman from, anybody who knows it, so better to make that faux pas than correct myself, so my apologies there. Okay, okay, let's not go there. But that's when you don't have speaker's notes. Anyway, and so after that, we also have Marie Newman joining us, and she will be speaking as well. So that's going to be the panel format. So let's go forward and please ask Brother Muqtadar to come over and introduce Jan Schakowsky, and we'll get going from there.
My name is Muqtadar Ahmed. It's a hard name for folks that are not Muslims. Islam hates us. There will be a total and complete ban on Muslims entering the United States. These are our elected officials who have made statements of this. Islam is cancer. Islam is a cult. This is why it is so important for us to be here. I was given a formal introduction for Congresswoman Schakowsky, but I want to make it personal. So for me, why it's important to see my congressperson here. Congressperson Schakowsky, she jointly sponsored the bill against Islamophobia in Congress. And that's a significantly important thing for us because the Islamophobia is not only a concern from the right wing, it's also a concern across all the spectrum of politics within the United States. So with that, I'll just maybe give a quick introduction. Congresswoman Schakowsky has been in the 9th District since 1998. She served 8 years in the Illinois Senate prior to that. This is her 12th term. And personally, she's got impressive accomplishments that I can't do justice in a minute here. But personally, she lives in Evanston, Illinois. Her husband is Robert Kramer and has 2 energetic rescue dogs, Franklin and Eleanor. She has 3 children, Ian, Mary, and a stepdaughter, Lauren, and 6 grandchildren. She graduated from the University of Illinois in 1965 with a BS in elementary education. So with that, help me welcome with an enthusiastic applause like we can, our Congresswoman. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and I am really grateful to see you as a constituent. And how many of you live in the 9th Congressional District? Are there quite a few? Well, I'm so glad to see you and all the rest of you as well. Mr. Hussain, or is it doctor? I don't want to get it wrong. I want to do a great thank you to the Muslim Public Affairs Council and the work that you're doing around the country. It's so incredibly important. I'm so happy to be here also at the Muslim Education Center. I've been here many, many times before for celebrations and for mourning as well. I want to also just say a special thank you to Dr. Khan for her leadership to be part of this, just to note, all-woman panel. And to be with all of you. It means so much. you know, it is the anniversary of 9/11. And I remember very well, because it was a day where it was thought that all of America and all of the world came together to protest that terrible attack on the United States of America. But it was somewhat different in our community, in my district, where because of the assumed religion of many people who may come from the Middle East or South Asia, that somehow they became targets. You know, you're a terrorist and get out of here. And I remember that there were women afraid to wear the hijabs, and there was a cab driver, or I can't remember if he was actually killed, but certainly beaten because he was wearing a turban of sort. I mean, there were a lot of people under attack. So what I decided to do was to gather the community together for a solidarity march down Devon Avenue, where we all carried American flags and pledged that we would be with one another, that we would not tolerate any kind of discrimination as a result of 9/11. And I didn't even have in my notes, but I do want to mention that, yes, I did pass a piece of legislation to create a special envoy to oppose Islamophobia. And I did it with my colleague, Ilhan Omar. And I was able to raise the fact that we have in the Jewish community, we have a special envoy at the federal level to look at anti-Semitism. And why should we not have a law that says that we will have a special envoy to stop Islamophobia? And the two of us were able to pass the bill in the House of Representatives. We are talking about our democracy today. I want to just read you a quote that in 1787, Benjamin Franklin, one of the founders of our democracy here, was walking out of the hall in Pennsylvania where they had signed the Constitution. It was the Constitutional Convention, and someone shouted out to me, "Doctor, what have we got? Are we a democracy, or are we a monarchy?" And he said, "We are a democracy if we can keep it." And now, he was kind of being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but also it was an ominous vision of what could possibly come, and absolutely true. So this is our challenge. Who are we? What are we? Are we going to continue to be a democracy? I never thought in my lifetime I would be asking that question. But this is our challenge, but it is also our opportunity right now to, as Americans, as voters, to make the decision about who are we, and what are we. And actually, that choice is going to be coming up very soon, in less than 2 months, because there is an election, which I want to tell you may be the most important election that we have seen ever in the United States, where our democracy is so in peril right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the election, but I want to just acknowledge how much our democracy is under attack right now. I don't really have to tell you. One of the first things when Donald Trump became president, what did he do? A Muslim ban on people coming into the United States of America. And I know many of you pushed back, and I know probably many of you were where I was at the airport saying, no way are we going to do that. And we have continued absolutely to stand for justice and for rights and against the Muslim ban. And again, in the House of Representatives, we voted to repeal the Muslim ban. So I'm very happy that we were able to do that. But, you know, we have had so many challenges. And, you know, we have seen that journalists and free thinkers have been under attack. That it's, you know, certainly not just the Muslim community. We have seen immigrants of all sorts who have been under attack. Even now, we know that that in Texas, the governor is just shipping people to Chicago who have come across the border. You know, we have seen workers in their workplace being under attack. We have seen healthcare, particularly for women, being under extreme attack, and decisions by the Supreme Court that have hurt millions and millions of Americans. So now is absolutely the time that we make a decision. What are we going to do to make sure that our democracy is intact? You know, my dear friend, my late dear friend, John Lewis, who was a hero of the civil rights movement, a man whose life was in danger, almost taken away many times by people who, you know, clobbered him over the head when he was trying to cross a bridge, or hurting him when he was a freedom rider struggling for freedom. And what John Lewis says, that the most precious power that we have as Americans is the vote. And that is something that belongs to, well, maybe not everyone in this room. Maybe not everyone in this room is a citizen. But everyone who is a citizen in the United States really has an obligation, a responsibility, and the privilege of casting a vote. So, you know, we, as I said, have seen all of these extreme right-wing attacks on voting. We have seen in so many states where people have been told that they can't vote by mail. Sometimes they say, well, you can vote by mail as long as you have an affidavit that shows that. That we have seen that people have been told that they can't get their right to vote, a voting card, unless they fill out extreme kinds of paperwork to do it. The challenges that we have had in so many states. Fortunately, Illinois is a remarkable exception. While other states have been limiting voting rights, Illinois has actually expanded voting rights. So we are proud, those of us who live in the state of Illinois. And so I just want to say, as a member of Congress, 24 years in the U.S. Congress, 8 years in the state legislature, but a lifetime of being an activist and organizer. And that's what I see really as my principal role, is to help inspire people to be participants, to be activists, and to be voters. And I want to say that when we talk about change, how do we make change? How do we build a country that we are proud to live in and raise our children and grandchildren in? I want to tell you, it is more important what you do, what everyday Americans do, than what actually we do in the Congress. Because we can do nothing without the pressure and the activism from outside the Congress. You know, this year, we finally passed, after 3 decades, some bills that would address gun violence. We passed five bills in a package in a bipartisan basis, mostly Democrats, a few Republicans that joined us. This is good. Now, why did people who had in the past been against anything having to do with any kind of control of weapons in this country, despite the fact that we have seen so many mass shootings, we have seen the everyday shootings that we see in the city of Chicago and other places in our communities? It's not because Republicans and others got smart and realized, oh, I've been on the wrong page for too long. It is because you changed the politics around guns. People who were advocates changed the politics. And what suddenly members of Congress who vote saw was that maybe it's not so good in my district to constantly be defending the gun manufacturers. Maybe we ought to take another look and pass some laws to prevent them. But it's been true on everything. It's been true on our civil rights. It's been true on our human rights that has taken people around the country who have come out and said, these are the changes that we have to have if we're going to vote for you, Mr. Legislator, this legislator. It's true at the state level. It's true at the federal level. It's true when it comes to school boards and to all kinds of local elections. Like Dr. Khan is now a trustee in Morton Road. Every level of government matters. We have to vote. And I want to tell you, we can do this. We can start the big changes now. This is not a matter of the next generation going to do it. Although I do want to say the young man who stood before us to say the prayer, wasn't he wonderful? I know you don't usually applaud after plans or after prayers, but can we give him just a round of applause? So we can do this. I want you to think about this. In less than 2 months, there is going to be an election. And I'm not going to get into party politics, but we're going to have an election on November 8th. I just want to tell you, it takes only a change of 2 more senators that share our values, that share our belief in democracy. Only a matter of voting to make sure that we maintain a majority of people in the House who share our values, who believe we need to protect our democracy. And then we will have enough votes to start introducing new laws that will protect immigrants, undocumented people, our dreamers who have wanted to become citizens for so long, who will protect all the people who have been robbed of their basic rights to health care, or to be who they are, or to represent constituencies of people who come from all over the globe. Let's remember, we are a nation of immigrants. Neither of my parents was born in the United States of America. And unfortunately, neither of my mom and dad lived to see me actually sworn into the Congress. But I feel like they know that their daughter would have the blessing of being in a country like this. Let's make sure that we keep it to be the country that we want, to be the country that can define what democracy is for ourselves and for people around the world, to give hope, to be that beacon on the hill. And my real message is to you that we can do this. We can win. We hear a lot of naysayers about out there. Turn them off. Stop watching cable TV. They have a negative message too often. And what I believe is that when we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. Come on, when we fight,
we win.
Thank you so much for having me here. I love you so much. You got all my stuff. I'm sorry, I have to run to another event. I wish I could stay with you all evening. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again to Congresswoman Jen Schakowsky. She's, the way we roll here at MPAC and MEC is when one Congresswoman leaves, another one joins us. So Mary Newman is about to enter the hall, so we should be balanced out. I know there's a reason why I really liked Jen Schakowsky, because she made me a doctor. It's something I've always wanted to be, but I couldn't get into med school. And then I tried IT, wasn't smart enough for that, so I became a lawyer at the end. So appreciate that very much. But it's on a personal note, she's been a true fighter for our community. We're running a few minutes behind. I was hoping we'd be running a few minutes early, but we'll do our best to get us back on track. And could I have everybody in the back please gather and take their seats? MEC President Masood Bijapuri, I just met you, I met your name. Let's have a seat so we can get going, please. Everyone in the back, let's get going so we can get the program going. And pictures later, please. Thank you, Shani. Just bring her up. Everybody, let's have a seat, and then if anyone needs some pictures, please step out just quietly. All right, let's go ahead and begin again. And my name again, well, let's have Marie just take a seat, and then we'll start. Thank you. Welcome. All right, Assalamu alaikum again. So for those who came late, I'm Fayaz Hussain. I work with MPAC, Muslim Public Affairs Council in DC. I'm an outside advisor for them. Along with MPAC, we have our other coalition partners here, CIOGC. Thank you to them for their support. Both they have a C3 as well as a C4 classification. They're doing great work in this area, including civic engagement. Please join. They have a table set up in the back. Thank you to MCC and MEC for all their support throughout. This has been going on for almost 2 months. And also thank you to Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition. And they've also been really tremendous in their help and outreach. They also have a table outside, so please go visit them. It's all critically important. With that, let's go ahead and start. And I'm really, really excited to welcome all the young people in here because this program was half geared toward democracy. It was half geared toward what we all should be doing, but also to inspire you all to take the mantle from us old people and take it to the next level. And the generation you have here on the table are your mentors. These are the folks who literally were in your shoes 10, 15 years ago. I'm so proud of them. And I am going to take it, despite them being very modest, they don't want me to go into their bios too much. I feel compelled to read the bios because it really is a story of who they are. It's shocking. When we do this around the country, we can't find better qualified people, and we're blessed to have these people in Chicago. And I'm talking now about Sadia Sindhu, Zinat Rahman, and I will never forget, and Congresswoman Mary Newman. You know her story, and we've got a personal introduction for her that we're going to do here soon. So let me go ahead and start with the program. Again, what we're going to do is we're going to first go with Sadia. I'm going to do her bio correctly, the intro. Give me just 2 minutes, if you don't mind. I'll speak as fast as I can. And then she's going to go for about 8 to 9, 10 minutes. And I'm a tough moderator, so Sadia, I'm going to hold you to it. Time limits. And then I'm also going to then separately come back and introduce Zina, and we'll go down that path. So one more sort of housekeeping item, 2 housekeeping items. We are a 501c3. All the organizations here are 501c3s, meaning that we do not take political sides. We are not here to endorse one party over another. What we're here to do is simply bring out the facts of what's going on. Never in the history of the United States have we been at such a perilous point, short of the Civil War, of course, where you have a ex-president who literally just vilified everyone, right? From Mexicans to being rapists and drug dealers to Muslims to the Charlottesville rally where people said they will not replace us, directing it at Jews. He got up there and said there were fine people on both sides. So we're dealing with an unprecedented situation, and it's really our wake-up call. So again, I thank all of you for coming out, because this is what's needed, this level of commitment. And so elections are coming up, but this really is about what we as American Muslims can be doing, what we as Americans alike, all of us can be doing to help heal our country, because we've gotten so much from the US, right? We have rights. I always say this as a joke. I would never want to be doing this work in Saudi Arabia. I couldn't even probably write an op-ed in a paper without worrying of getting, you know what. MPAC recently published an op-ed. It got published in the Sun-Times. It's an amazing op-ed, and I know Marie loved it. She texted me recently. I'll let you maybe plug that later, but thank you for that. So let's get going with Sadia. So I think I can do it without my glasses. Let's go for it. All right, please bear with me. Sadia Sindhu is the founding executive director of the University of Chicago Center for Effective Government. Sadia, can you raise your hand so people know who we're talking about? There we go. All right. A nonpartisan research center housed at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy. CEG was founded with an ambitious but vital mission to strengthen democratic institutions and improve the capacity of government to solve public problems. CEG centers scholarship and conversations on institutional reform in the broader context of strengthening our democracy. Conversations that bring together myriad stakeholders and transcend stark differences to achieve our ultimate goal of a flourishing democracy and effective government. Key initiatives include the Civic Leadership Academy, the Data and Democracy Initiative, Not Another Politics podcast, and a series of academic conferences and media partnerships. Sadia has served in a variety of strategic roles in the public and the private sectors, most recently as the director of University of Chicago's Civic Leadership Academy, prior to her integration into CEG. Sadia is a fellow in the second class of the Civil Society Fellowship and a member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking, just Google Aspen. You'll be blown away by what these organizations represent and the caliber of people that are in these organizations. So for Sadia to, you know what, I'll stop at it. Just very proud, let me say it that way. All right, she serves on the Research Advisory Council for the Partnership for Public Service, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that strives for a more effective federal government by inspiring a new generation to serve and transform the way government works. Sadia is an inaugural member of the Vote is Sacred Thought Leaders Organizing Committee, a national multi-year nonpartisan civic engagement initiative led by Interfaith America. Sadia has previously held roles at Rothschild Global Advisory, the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and Human Capital Research Corporation. Sadia previously served on the National Board of the Muslim Public Affairs Council. Thank you, Sadia, for your leadership. It was because of you I got more involved in Impact. You should know that. When I met you and we did karaoke together 3 years ago at Rashid bin Rumaghazi's home, right there. All right, and chaired the organization's board-level policy committee. She's the proud daughter of immigrants, a first-generation college grad, and a graduate of MEC. That's why we're having the program here, because they really wanted to do a program here. So you guys should be amazingly proud of what you've been able to contribute. Again, young people, this is where you get to when you go to MEC, MCC, and Foundation, ICM, etc. She received an MS in Higher Education Policy from Western University and a BS-FS, which is, I know, School of Foreign Service, in International Politics from Georgetown University. Sadia lives in Chicago with her husband, Usman, and daughter. So I will stop there. There's more, but I'll stop there. But I'm sorry I've taken up probably 5 minutes of your time, but thank you for being here. Go for it.
Are we doing opening remarks, or are we
Opening
going
remarks.
straight into the Q&A?
Just opening remarks.
Okay, so assalamu alaikum everyone. It's so nice to be here today. I have to say it's especially lovely to be back at MEC. I'm part of the first graduating class of MEC. I started here as a 3-year-old. I was the first graduating 8th grade class, so it's especially lovely to be back here today. I'll keep my comments short. I mostly want to thank the organizers for bringing together this sort of a conversation in our mosque, in our spaces. A lot of times when we talk about our democracy, we think about getting to an election. And I think the biggest thing I want to drive home today is that it's not just about the election. Absolutely, we should be voting, and as a community, we have been voting. I just want to share one data stat, because I know we're representing the University of Chicago, and we're all about data, but in 2016, 60% of all American Muslims who are eligible to vote were registered to vote. That number is now closer to 80% in 2022. It's amazing. And it's because of organizations like MPAC, like MEC, like the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, like CIOGC, who champion getting our community out to vote, that we're able to achieve that sort of success. But what I'm hoping today's conversation might take us to is, how do we continue to bring democracy reform and institutional level reform to the forefront? So I'm really thrilled to be sitting up here with these two wonderful panelists, and I'll keep it short because I know we're already running a bit late on time. So, yeah, I'm not sure where you went. There you are.
I wasn't sure if you were about to open your remarks with more, or...
I thought I'd get us back on time.
That sounds great. You were very kind. Thank you. You don't have many, and she's humble as well. There are not many panelists who you know who take less than what they're allotted. So, awesome. All right, let's jump. And we have plenty of questions. We've received a lot of questions from the community already, so the discussion is going to be pretty lively. Let's start with Zinat Rahman's bio. And Zinat, again, please take the necessary time for your opening remarks. So, I met Zinat recently through Sadia, another incredibly impressive person, and want to read her bio to do it justice as well. Zinat Rahman is the executive director of the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago, whose mission is to foster in students a passion for public service, meaningful dialogue, and active engagement in our democracy. And for those of you who don't know, the Institute of Politics was started by David Axelrod, who you all know was one of the senior advisors of President Obama. So she literally is the head of the politics institute that he started. Prior to this role, she led the Inclusive America Project at the Aspen Institute, where her work focused on the critical role of faith communities, building bridges across differences, and supporting a strong civil society and a vibrant democracy. Rahman previously served as a president political appointee, as a special advisor to Secretaries Hillary Clinton and Kerry on global youth issues in the U.S., Department of State on global youth, in the U.S. Department of State on global youth issues. In this position, she encouraged foreign governments to respond to youth issues through policy change, and she created opportunities for young people to pursue their economic and civic aspirations. She created private sector partnerships focused on youth employment and skill development, worked with U.S. embassies to create an extensive network of more than 75 youth councils worldwide, and build global entrepreneurship programs to support nascent entrepreneurs in emerging economies. Prior to this appointment, she served as director at the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships in the United States, Agency for International Development, USAID. In this role, she led external engagement efforts with various faith-based and community organizations to build support for USAID priorities. Rahman is a frequent speaker and commentator who has spoken at venues such as the United Nations, the Nobel Peace Prize Forum, and the White House, and appeared on CNN, MSNBC, and many international news outlets. She's a board member of IREX, a global development and education organization that works in more than 100 countries on priorities such as education, leadership, information, and youth. She's also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, a Truman National Security Fellow, and working group co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Systemic Inequalities and Social Cohesion. Again, I really urge all you folks to look the bio up, look at these organizations, because these are all world-class. This is where policy is made and how our lives are impacted. So it's not doing justice for me to just go through and time pressure to read this to you. Implore you all to go back and please review this from folks from our community. Finally, she received a master's degree in Middle East Studies from the University of Chicago and a BA in psychology from the University of Illinois. Zina, thank you for making time. Pleasure to have you, and please give opening remarks or whatever you feel comfortable with. We are on time. We're good.
No, I think, can you, yeah. Thank you, Fayaz. I think Sadia wanted to get us a kind of some interactive conversation. That's why we're going to keep our opening remarks short. But Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's amazing to, first of all, be in the basement of MEC, but Also to see this room so full, because I thought, Sadia and I spoke this morning and we said, okay, you're bringing 7 family members, I'm bringing 5, we're gonna have at least 12 people there, it's gonna be good. But, when Fayaz and MPAC, NCIOGC, and all of the other partners, Illinois Muslim Studies Coalition, asked me to do this, it was a no-brainer because this is my home mosque and this is where I grew up. And so coming back to this community, and my parents who are here, I know immigrated here in the 70s, and that generation, as we know, created these institutions for us to preserve our culture, to preserve our religion, and to teach it to us, right, the Gen Xers and the others. And so it's been amazing, and I think this is a reflective moment when you think about, today being 21 years since 9/11, and focus on what our community has gone through, the good and the bad, and what our country has gone through, the good and the bad, in those past 2 decades. And what I want us to talk about, and the question I posed to all of us is, what is, if we're kind of the post 9/11 moment, so you could say, 20 years on, we withdrew from Afghanistan, last year. It's not clean. We didn't, we're not fully withdrawn. But what does this era look like that's, really, I think, defined by polarization, divisiveness? And what has the Muslim community learned that could be instructive to other Americans and to strengthen our democracy? And there's a lot in there that I want to get into. I want to just, start with just saying that when we look at it with the generational lens of, there was Muslims who came to this country in the earliest slave ships, so the 1600s, but really the generation that really feels centered here, being in MEC, is the post-1965 Immigration Act, immigrants who came and who built these institutions that allowed all of these other diverse Muslim institutions to be built on top of them. And I would like for us to spend some time thinking about and reflecting what that means as we're going into an election season that's going to start. Representative Congresswoman Schakowsky mentioned that. In November, it's going to go for the next 2 years. And, just what does it mean for our institutions to be strong, and what do we as citizens and as a community want to bring to the table for that? So I'll stop there and pass the mic and then go from there.
All right, I'm really hoping for a vigorous Q&A because the program's going to end before the food gets here. There'll be a riot. So take your time. We've got plenty. I'm going to ask Shadin Mali to come up and introduce Congresswoman Marie Newman. And I thought this was more appropriate than me because Shadin, who I've come to know recently as well, is an incredible organizer, advocate, everything and all of the above. She has been so instrumental in getting Congresswoman Newman to get to know our community, to do incredible work, and she's been one of our biggest supporters when it comes to Palestine-Israel issues, India, what's going on there. And so Shadin is the Chief of District Affairs. She's been with Marie since 2017. And I wish I had printed out a bio for you, but I will just start to hand it over to you, and please do it, and thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having us. Thank you for the introduction, Fayaz. He asked me to do a more of an intimate introduction for Congresswoman Marie Newman because I've known her since 2017. And the way that we met was very special because Congresswoman Marie Newman is a woman of the people. We met at a protest. We had a leader in the community, an elected leader that was attacking children in our schools, Middle Eastern children, immigrant Middle Eastern children. And Congresswoman Marie Newman stood by our side, shoulder to shoulder, protesting against this bigotry. And and this is right off of 2017, right after Trump got elected. And a lot of people they felt emboldened to make a lot of offensive remarks, discriminatory remarks, and Congresswoman Marie Newman was the right person to lead. We needed a leader like that. And that's how we met, and I've been with her ever since. She has a background she created programs against bullying. Her son was actually bullied in high school, And she saw a problem, and she said, we need to do something about this, wrote a book about the issue and how to deal with it nationally, worked with it. Obama adopted the book and the program. So she's also a spokesperson was a spokesperson for Moms Demand Action. And that's really, that exemplifies who Congresswoman Maria Newman is. We had a congressperson that was representing the 3rd District that was not in line with the values of our district. He was one of the most conservative Democrats in the district. And he was anti-immigrant, anti-Palestinian American. I mean, he worked to create bills that worked against our interests. And that was one of the main reasons why I was not involved in politics before that, really. And that's why I became involved with Congresswoman Maria Newman. So anyway, she's been one of the most prolific legislators in office. She has been a big advocate for our community. Anybody that knows her knows that she's been an outspoken person for the Muslim community, the Palestinian American community, the South Asian community. She's just been a strong advocate for all marginalized communities, and also building alliances and partnerships with Latinos and bringing us all together. And that's the type of leader we need right now. So, Congresswoman Maria Newman.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. So I'm going to say a couple words about Shannon. She's my Chief of District Affairs, and I could not have been elected or received as much great counsel during my term so far if she had not been around. So please thank her whenever you do. It's amazing. And you should know her, by the way, so know her. So thank you to the other panelists today. Thank you for having me. Thank you to MPAC and MEC and the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, CIOGC, and I think there's a couple other groups represented here. So thank you all for doing this today. These are important discussions, right? So today is a hard topic, right? It's 9/11. And while it was one of our hardest days in our country, for all Americans, all in caps, A-L-L, all, every American, it was a hard day. What I knew that day, I'll tell you how the day started. 8:46, the first plane comes in and crashes into the first tower, right? I have my baby, who was, I think, 9 or 10 months old at the time, and my toddler. I'm folding laundry because I'm trying to hightail it into work fast, right? And I realized that this was not just a boo-boo like a plane went into a building in short order, and they started talking about it. And immediately, I was just so shocked. By midday, I'll tell you where my brain went. This is going to be a problem because there is going to create issues around these foreign and radicalized people that have very different views than most 99.999% of Muslims and Arab Muslim Americans. And I knew right away that was going to be a problem in our country, right away that day. So that day, I called, I think it was around 4 or 5, a couple of friends of mine, and that happened to be Arab Muslim American, and I said, I want you to stay in very close contact with me and whatever I can do, because I just immediately was worried, rightfully so. And I think we've made some progress, but I also think that we've had some regression since the Trump era started. And that's super heartbreaking for me, which is why it is really important for all of us to stand together, no matter what. In my 9/11 post today, I made it clear that we are all together in this, and we're all working together, even when we don't agree on everything. And we have to stay together. An important note as we move forward towards the election is that a vote is not a Valentine. You don't have to love every single little piece about every candidate, but the one that agrees with you the most is probably the best way to go. And not voting is not an option today, by the way. Not an option. Because we have folks out there that would be very problematic, and they're in our backyard, so let's make sure we all vote. And I'm also gonna ask a little homework of everybody tonight, and even my panelists. I want everybody to commit right now that if you know 5 or 10 people who think they might not vote, I want you to call them and tell them, today is 9/11, you have more reason than you can ever believe to vote. So is everybody gonna commit to that, to calling people? I do not see all the hands up. I'm still a sitting congresswoman, get your hand up. Thank you. It's really important, I just can't stress that enough. Today, I'm so pleased to have this discussion and answer questions. What you need to know about me is that I have never been afraid to lose a job, ever in my life. I've taken a lot of risks in a lot of positions because I've taken some risky positions. And I will never be afraid to when you're doing the right thing, right? So I'm glad to answer any questions today, and I'm so excited to hear from both of you. Thank you, Pat.
All right, thank you. So we will begin. I think we had a lot of questions that came in, and I've tried to go through them all and synthesize them into what the Democracy Forum is about. And so I'll go with about 15 minutes of questions that we've already received, some from the organizing committee, and then we'd love to open it up to the audience, the young folks, ask your questions. And we'll go in, I think, somewhat of a depth in an order. I'll start with Sadia, then go to Zena, Congressman Newman, and then we'll go back and forth with this audience, and I'll try to manage it as best as we can. All right, so first question for Sadia. Organizationally, advancing democracy reform requires us to be reactive to present opportunities and exigencies, but there's also room for planning. How does your organization, CEG, anticipate and plan for the intermediate and long-term future of democracy? Could you take that and
I feel like that's a very UChicago question too, so I'm going to try to break it down a bit. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So the question was, how do you, when you're thinking about democracy reform, how do you plan around that? One of the things I had mentioned earlier in my opening remarks is that we often get fixated on elections, which we absolutely should. I don't want to take away from that moment, but how do you keep up the momentum? When you're actually thinking about the erosion of our democracy, democratic backsliding, our democracy not functioning as it should, and it hasn't been for decades, how do you focus attention on that? And I think the thing that kind of comes from me from that question, Fayaz, is how do you do that work in coalition? So I work for a research center. I launched a research center at the University of Chicago where we think deeply about these challenges and put out top-notch scholarship. But we're not doing that in a vacuum at the University of Chicago. We're not just sort of looking at each other and saying, hey, let's write more reports and let those reports live here in Hyde Park. We're doing that work actively with those in office, those who care about democracy reform there, those who are advocating for it as organizations based in DC, and also recognizing that the work that we do does have, there are moments when there are politically opportune moments, and to take advantage of those opportunities as well. So I think the thing that I always sit with is, if you're doing work just by yourself, you're not taking advantage of that. And I think one thing Zina had asked earlier, what are some lessons that can come from the American Muslim community? I think one of the biggest lessons that comes from our community is how well we work in coalition. If you look at the organizations, again, that are involved in tonight's event, they're all working in coalition. It's not about one organization. The Illinois Muslim Civic Coalitions, came about, 3-4 years ago? Marianne, looking right at you. 3-4 years ago. And it's one of the most active organizations across the US of American Muslims and just generally of Americans involved in democracy reform. MPAC, same thing. MPAC is not just doing this work as MPAC, they're working actively with CIOGC, Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, the folks over at Engage. And they're doing it also with larger civil rights organizations. I don't know if a lot of folks in the room know, but MPAC is part of the Leadership Conference as well, which is one of the oldest coalition organizations around civil rights. So I think about that question, and I think about it as, if I'm the only one at the table, I'm not doing my job. And I think that's a lesson that we can really take to our community, because we're never really the only ones at the table, because we are actively pulling up chairs for others.
Great. Want to jump in? Anybody, or okay, so I have a lot of questions for everyone. So if you have a burning follow-up, panelists, please let me know, and I'll call you, and then I'll keep going. Let's go to Zena. Also, for those of you who haven't seen this, Zena chaired, organized, put together with a large group of people, I'm sure, a 2-3-day conference at the U of C Institute of Politics called The Disinformation and the Erosion of Democracy. It's phenomenal, and I'm a political geek, as you guys can tell, and I probably watched about 17 hours or 20 plus hours of video that is available. I have. In fact, you can quiz me on it and I can answer what they talk about. President Obama was one of the speakers. A Nobel Prize winner was one of the speakers, and then Adam Kinzinger. I could just go on. Klobuchar. It was just a list of who's who. I implore each and every one of you to go Google what I said: erosion, disinformation, erosion of democracy. Incredible points, because what they really crystallize for all of us is, because of the social media, the disinformation, the echo chambers, we're just headed down a path, like a cliff, if you will, to a point of no return potentially. But we're not going to bring you all down to that level and not give you solutions, and inshallah, we hope Zena and the panelists here can help us with that. So Zena, taking some ideas and thoughts that were discussed there, I have a two-part question. First is, can you define for the audience what is disinformation versus misinformation? Because we all are on social media, so we really need to understand how do we figure out what's right, what's deep fake, etc. And then at your forum, President Obama spoke at length about the dangers of where we are headed, and that democracy not being a self-executing instrument. What he meant by that is, we just can't assume that these rights will always exist. No one had thought Trump would ever get elected. No one thought COVID would ever happen. Like, who thought that, right? But we're already seeing this incredible events happen in our lives. So President Obama, but still shared a very hopeful message. He said that recent studies have shown that people can still be influenced and change their minds if you have positive interactions with them. So my question again, disinformation versus misinformation, and is President Obama being too optimistic?
If you want to know more about the institute that I work for, it's politics.uchicago.edu. We have a YouTube channel, and like all of the 3-day conference on disinformation is listed there. So you just put in University of Chicago Institute of Politics. And the reason we did this conference is because I think we realized the role that disinformation and misinformation has in fracturing democracy, has in aiding polarization. And so we brought together experts from around the world with the Atlantic magazine to just really identify the problem and then also identify solutions. That's the biggest difference between those two words is the intention behind it. And so disinformation is information that is false or deliberately created to harm a person, a social group, or a country. Misinformation is also information that's false, but it's not created with the intention of causing harm. Instead, the person sharing the information is sharing inaccurate information in an unintentional way. And if you're part of any family WhatsApp groups, then you've probably been privy to misinformation. I think, to me, this also speaks to it kind of connects to the point of like, what has the Muslim community learned from 2 decades post 9/11 in terms of disinformation and misinformation foments polarization and divides us as citizens, right? And I think when you look at communities, are we fractured, are we together? And so I think what we learned as a community was that we were a bubble. I mean, we were a community that was looking inward, building our next generation of Muslim leaders, and not necessarily looking at other institutions, other organizations. And what happened in the last 2 decades is that we've become a bridging community, right? We opened our mosques, we opened our institutions, we created institutions to tell people who we are. And that's not Islam means peace. I mean, those are some of the early messages, but it was really through our service, through the work that we did around everything from disaster recovery to food pantry to being active members in our communities. That to me is the evolution of the last 2 years. And so when President Obama says, democracy is not self-executing, I think it means, like, you can't just sit around and lament at everything bad that is going on. I mean, I think what we have to do is play an active role in our democracy. And that is something anybody can do. You don't have to be a congresswoman to do it. It's amazing. But it's something that each and every one of us should do, even if we're lawyers or doctors or any of that, you know, and so I think understanding what our role is and, you know, what we can do, and what we've learned. I mean, we've learned that we were demonized, you know, because of the acts of a very few, small number of individuals. An entire global community was demonized for that. And we didn't react by becoming further a bubble. We realized that this is a moment for outrage. And so whenever you all think of, I think, bad news or, you know, there are things to despair about. I mean, there are many things that I think, you know, that trouble us as a democracy, as a community. But you also have to think about the good. And, you know, this administration, this Biden administration has the most Muslim American political appointees of any administration to date. Yeah. So we have Muslims in the White House working on economic policy, science policy, working in legislative affairs. I mean, that's just a small, we have Muslims in Department of Defense, at the Department of State. The head of policy planning who makes the 2 and 3 decades, you know, foreign policy is a Muslim. And so, and you know, we have also somebody from this community, is our ambassador for international religious freedom through marriage, Rashad Hussain. You know, so we have so much representation and so much good has happened. And I think that's why I do what I do, because I think it's really important for like all of you people who are way younger than me in the audience thinking about like, how do I do this for a living, to do it, to take the chance, because we're seeing that benefit, you know, like from generations like mine who didn't know what we were doing, but we still did it. I think this next generation is going to be so much more savvy in political engagement.
So I just want to put a fine point on that, because you know, Billy offered something very important there, is that you can affect these bridges in very tactile ways. So during COVID, all of the mosques in my community, in my district, took care of us. I'm not kidding. They found food where nobody else could find food and fed everybody. They got social services and mental health care to all of the communities. We have, in the Illinois 3, the current Illinois 3, we have a strong Latino community, South Asian community, urban Muslim community, and standard white community, right? Everybody worked together, but the mosques saved the day, and it was noted, and people recognized it, and they were appreciative, and I made a big deal about it. Because, and what was important about that is that when you say you can't affect change, you can do it every day, and that's what Sam was saying, is that no matter what you do, when you talk about the beauty of your faith and the beauty of the people and the beauty of the kindness and the respect and the brilliance of the people and what they bring to this country, that's when we're making really big bridges, and that's every day. That's something you can do every day just by talking to your neighbor. So I just wanted to say yes and more.
And I know, Congresswoman, that this is, you know, sad because you unfortunately didn't get re-elected. But I know a lot of us in here contributed to your campaign, volunteered. But I just wanted to put a point on it, and she didn't share this, but I know this from public record that Congressman Newman literally got $1.5+ million approved for 2 Muslim organizations. I don't want to get into all the details because it's still pending approval of the Senate. But whatever investment we did, made in her trying to get reelected because she's a thought leader, she's courageous, it pays dividends in millions because of the work they do. So I don't know if you guys knew that, but that's how incredible her work is. And inshallah, I will get it. Thank you for recognizing that. Knowing you now, I don't think we'll be seeing you, inshallah, in tons of places. Maybe the Senate, maybe who knows where, we'll see. So I know I have no idea what her plans are, but I know she'll do something. All right, so question for Congresswoman Newman now. So on this 21st anniversary of 9/11, we are reminded about how our country has always been very externally focused about the external enemy, the foreign terrorist. However, recent events have shown that our domestic political terrorists can actually cause us much more long-term damage. And it was clearly on display during the horrific January 6th attack on our Capitol. Can you please share your thoughts on the rise of white nationalism and the toxic white masculinity going on within some parts of America, the evangelical community, etc.?
Well, that's a big topic. Let me start by saying that I'm hearkened back to your op-ed that you and your colleagues alum wrote, and talking about there are, in this community, there are more first-generation people than there are any other second, third, fourth, been here a long time. And what's important to note about that is that they've come from very challenging environments. So when they see scary things happen here, like domestic terrorists, that's doubly frightening for them. And so that's why we have to really double down and get on this. And Liz is exactly right. The number one threat across all of our federal agencies, whether it is the CIA, FBI, standard rank and file police in every community, every law enforcement organization that has done is domestic terrorists, and they're called white supremacists. That's who domestic terrorists are. They're white supremacists. And often, and I'm sad to report this, oftentimes they are evangelical. So you hit the nail on the head, and this is a huge problem. And I'll tell you, there's this meme that's in my head all the time, and it's not a kind one, and I don't mean to make fun of anyone. But white evangelical men over 50 that are wealthy in the suburbs are hanging on like this. I'm not kidding. That's the only way I can describe it. Like they're hanging on within an inch of their lives because to remain relevant. And we all know that we're just science-based people, right? There will be more black and brown people in the U.S. By 2045 than there will be white people. And that's A-okay. So embrace it, folks. You know, I mean, truly. Like, when I talk to these people that have such a problem with that, I'm like, well, guess what? You can't stop evolution. It's this wicky thing, you know. So embrace it and love it and enjoy it. So the reason I share all of that is because domestic terrorism is not just a problem because it makes our communities scarier and there are criminals running about. It is scary because it goes at our democracy and it can break it down. So let me just tell you a little bit about January 6th. My third day on the job, by the way. So there are these big tunnels that go under the office buildings of the members of Congress to the Capitol where we vote. And that was the day, as you'll recall, we were certifying the election. So the process goes like this, is that you do it one state by a time. And it was during COVID, right? So that only a few of us could go to the Capitol at a time, be there, vote, and come back. So we were running back and forth in the tunnels a lot. After like the fourth trip, we're on, I don't know, the fifth or sixth state, I'm walking through, and so if you can think about those glass windows back there, I see my chief and one of my assistants and three Secret Service guys saying, "Ma'am," like this. And I was like, okay, what's going on? Because we knew the protest was going on, and I wasn't thinking that much about it. And they came and grabbed me, and I forget this, it's a little bit funny, is that they said, "I think you're going to need to take off your shoes so you can run faster." And I was like, I've been running in high heels for 35 years. I will run faster than you do. So, ran back to my office, and literally we had to throw large pieces of furniture against the doors to make sure, because that's what they told us to do, to keep ourselves safe. So then it's about 7 or 8 hours of trying to figure out, and remember, I just hired all my staff, so I've got like 10 staffers there, and I'm trying to help them understand that, like, look, this is, we're gonna get through this now, you know, every chill, all's good, you know. So we're talking through the legislative agenda and a bunch of things. It gets to be around 8 o'clock, and we start hearing that finally, you know, Trump has allowed the National Guard to come in because he's prevented them from coming in and helping and all of those things. Starting to get to push back the terrorists. Those were domestic terrorists that day, white supremacists. Pushing them back, we have it under control, and they have what they call perimeter is control. So, so then we go back, and they ask each of us to vote on it. Will you go back and continue? Are you comfortable enough? And not one member said no, by the way. So all of us were glad to go back. And since then, it has been my mission to do bills with Republicans that even voted to not certify the election. Here's why. I let them know that I was furious about that out of the gate, had coffee with them, and I said, you have got to do better. This is not acceptable. But I also did bills with them, because there are things that we can agree on. And here's this funny thing, talking back about bridges, is that you've got to build the bridge back, right? In between, but continually remind them that, look, you can't support domestic terrorists and you can't support white supremacists, period. Not acceptable, will not work. But we do have to, we all live in this country together, and we do have to continue to build bridges. So I thought Faiz's remarks in his op-ed were really important, because you have a powerful story, right? Your members of your family are first generation. Tell that story about how those challenging environments and why you came here, and why it's important for us to hang on to democracy and protect it for all those reasons. So thank you for that op-ed.
Thank you so much. We'll send it out to everyone. I think it's important because it talks from the perspective of first generation, second generation, and third generation as to what the MAGA movement means to us as Muslim Americans. It's really crystallized in the form. All right, let's go to Sadia. I've got 10 more minutes of prepared questions, and then we'll go to the audience. Sadia, I'm going to combine two questions that came in. One is, great question. It says, do you believe current democratic and government institutions are equipped to deal with these very unique and unprecedented forces, meaning social media, echo chambers, Fox, all that? Do we think what our currently have on solution, are they good? Will they help survive, help the American democracy survive? And the next question is somewhat related, saying, do you see any democracies in the work that you're doing globally that are getting it right? And if so, can we learn from them? Like, what are they doing better than us?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. In terms of looking at democracy worldwide, democracy is on its heels. It's on its heels here at home. It's on its heels. Just in about a month and a half, I'll be in France putting on a conference about what democracy looks like in Western Europe. There's a lot of folks from the South Asian community here. We know that democracy is certainly in decline as we look at South Asia. So as we think about what's happening in the US, a lot of what we're experiencing is not dissimilar from that of what's happening in other countries. We're not unique here. The other question was around, do we have the institutions to live up to the promise of democracy here? We have the institutions, for sure. Are the institutions thriving? They're not. And that's the thing that's the work of my center. That's the work that I think of democracy reform long term. How do we have a Congress that allows its Congress people to deliver on the promises that they want to deliver on as well? How do we have an executive branch that really does work? So there's a lot of really complex challenges that our democracy faces and its institutions face as you look at actual government, but then you also look at media. I think Congresswoman Schakowsky, before she left, had mentioned, don't watch cable news. And Zinat spoke a little bit about disinfo and misinfo. As you think about driving democracy, you think about it driving the media environment. That's not what we have right now. I think we've all been victims of disinformation, misinformation. Surprisingly, though, again, I'll throw another stat in here. ISPU does a really interesting Muslim survey every single year, and they just put out a really compelling and interesting report, the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition. But it said around disinfo and misinfo, specifically related to COVID, American Muslims are actually far more trusting in government than the rest of American communities. So as a community, I think we actually have been able to avoid some of these things. But that being said, our institutions are not at a point where we can say we have a thriving democracy. I wish I could cite other examples for you, Fayaz, but the reality is democracy is in decline globally. So it's a challenge that we as thought leaders, as community leaders, have really a lot to look towards in the future.
All right, so let's try to keep at solutions here. So next question for Zina. And I think this might work if you want to grab that, or this one over here. All right. Zina, can you share, again, going back to the forum, again, incredible content. Could you, from your helping sort of lead that and sort of synthesize it for us, are you seeing any positive trends out there that you learned, any pointers that speakers shared about what can we be all doing rather than feeling hopeless and helpless, and other things that, are there tools out there, are there any sort of pointers that you can share with us about what we can do to protect democracy both at home and abroad?
Thank you for asking. I think, yeah, I have a few thoughts. I think the first is, act local, you know, and so, I mean, you're all here, which means you're interested in this topic. I think everybody should read the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition's report. They might have hard copies out there. If they don't, you can look it up online. But it's great data about the Illinois Muslim community, which includes the data point that Illinois has the highest Muslims per capita of any state in this country. And so we have enormous power if we wield it properly. We have midterm elections coming up. Register to vote, be a poll worker, join your local school board. There are many ways to be involved if you want to on the local level. So that's just kind of concretely what you should do is like start with small d democracy. I think the second thing that's been in my mind is we should be really clear about who the us versus them is. And it's not Muslims versus evangelicals, it's not Democrats versus Republicans, right? And we've been demonized as a community, so we should know what that feels like. And the us is the people who care to live in this democracy and make it better and more vibrant. And I think, the them are the hate-filled, white supremacists who want this country to only be for a small amount of people. And the us is so much bigger, but I think we should be really careful to not draw the lines between, on partisan ideology or on, because if you look at the CHIPS Act, the climate bill, I mean, there's a lot of good bipartisan legislation that is being passed. It's not all doom and gloom, right? And so know your facts. Don't spread misinformation. I mean, there are a lot of, just be curious. I mean, I think there are a lot of ways to be involved. Find the thing, especially for everybody young in the audience, find the thing you're passionate about. Is it climate change? Is it women's rights? Is it gun control? And then learn about it and then learn how you can be involved in it, because this is such a good time to be an active young person, because there's so many ways, because of social media, because of technology, to do things, online and offline, and kind of translate those things. So I think there's a lot of hope. I see it every day with my students at University of Chicago who could go be, investment bankers at Goldman Sachs, but they're not. They're starting nonprofits, or they're going to be really low-paid, pages on the Hill, because they really do believe in our democracy. And so I feel lucky that I get to do a job where I feel hopeful, but I think there are lots of things to be hopeful about. You just have to work for them.
I just want to get one point of hope. In this past Congress, the 117th Congress, in an average Congress, about 55 or 60% of all bills are bipartisan, and that's something that's not known. So just in every Congress, we have a lot of bipartisan bills that pass. And it's because they're good things, like we're going to give extra money for water, or some program that is across the nation, SMART, Head Start, all of those things, right? So in any given year, but this Congress has been the most prolific Congress in almost 115 years. And here's why, is that Zia mentioned a couple of acts, the Inflation Reduction Act. That is the largest investment we've had in climate ever. And while we need much more, and we need to work on a lot more, and I hope everybody in this room is excited about climate, because I am, and you should be fighting about it every day. But that's the largest investment we've had ever. We've had the largest investment in transportation, infrastructure, and green programs attached to that ever in our history, in our 240 plus year history. So, and the CHIPS and Science Act, very good, the Competes Act, all of those things are moving us forward with manufacturing and innovation and research. So be hopeful that all that happened in this Congress. Now I'm going to be partisan for a second, so I'm very sorry. I'm just going to say.
I'm afraid, very
Yeah.
good heart.
Yeah, so very sorry, but this was a Democratic Congress. And we got more done in the last 120 years with a very small margin. So just remember that when you get in the voting. But then I'm not being partisan for partisan's sake. It's because we got some things done. But we got things done because of you. You all cared, you all spoke up, and you all drove all of us. So that's what our jobs are, is to reflect our communities.
Okay, thank you. And it's a fact statement, so it's okay, it's admissible without getting in trouble. All right, so on the note, I think it's been a great response, because the first question was about evangelical community, what's going on there. But at MPAC, we've created a very important program called Mustard Seed. And what that does is it literally engages evangelicals around the country. And we have a documentary coming out about work that was done where we engaged with an evangelical community. A Christian lady who passed away gave us some grant from her to build interfaith bridges. A doctor named Dr. Islam, a female doctor, took care of patients in Lubbock at the height of COVID, and we have video from the Christians from this community crying and saying, we prayed for you for your good well-being, for what you did for us. That's incredible. So the point of the message again is, we have to engage, right? We have to keep chipping away, because we all, despite 71.2 million voting for Trump, there's got to be 100 million Americans out there who are good people, who are either misinformed, disinformed, whatever. So we've got to keep at it. It's hard work, but that's the privilege of being in a democracy. My next question is again to Congresswoman Newman, because it is your turn, and I'm going to try to wrap it up soon so we go to the audience. We know about the India situation, RSS in India, which is one of the most extremist Nazi ideology, literally. The folks who assassinated Gandhi, their adherents, some of them are in power in India. We know what's going on in Palestine. And again, I want to make sure in India, our fight is never against good Hindus, it's always against the extremists. So the question is, both India, Palestine, as you see what's happening with the democracies around the world, particularly India, can you please share your thoughts both there and again, as far as Palestinians go? Our community has been fighting for at least 50 years for the rights and dignities of Palestinians, and we do recognize Israel's right to exist and thrive. And it's not mutually exclusive, but we would love it for you to be able to share with us, how did you find your courage to speak out? And can you help us educate your other colleagues in Congress to speak out about Palestine, speak out about India? Very important document.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's courage, it's just the right thing to do. I think it's just really clear to me. It's just always really clear to me what the right thing to do is. Thank you. I was so funny accepting thanks or praise on that, because it's just the right thing to do. Is that everybody should be equal, everybody should have food and water and be able to thrive in their own home country. So it's wrong that in places like India and Kashmir and the Uyghurs in China and in Palestine, that they are treated the way that they are, and it's just a fact. And so for me, when I talk to my colleagues, we've been there about, I think I had been 3 weeks into my term, and we learned that the Israelis were blocking the vaccines to the Palestinians. And so we put together a letter, and usually in a letter where you send a forceful letter to the State Department saying you're not doing a good job and you need to get those vaccines to the Palestinians and what's wrong with the Israeli government is doing, you get, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 people. Well, you know what? We did this funny thing, like just walking down the hallway, sitting down and describing the situation and taking the time and working with members and saying, this is really bad, what is happening. The Israeli government is really wrong here. So we got 25 people to sign, and that was a big deal. So when we talk about those incremental wins, let's take them, right? And let's keep doing that. That was one of probably 7, 8, 9, 10 things that we did during my term, where it was simply just talking to people to help them understand how incredibly serious this is, that, you know, we have these situations going on. I will tell you that while I think I can be honest with this group, there was backlash on that. I just kept going and I just persevered. And you can never ever be afraid to lose your job. You can never ever, when you need to do the right thing. So it's okay to lose your job, and I did. It might have been partially because of some of the votes I hit. I don't regret it at all. In fact, I'd do it again in a New York minute. And the reason is because it was the right thing to do, and we got further faster. Because just because I won't go on in Congress doesn't mean someone won't pick up the ball and we can work with them. So let's keep getting further, faster, and really pushing it. Incremental wins are good, and you should keep doing those, but it's fighting on every front and being very bold, because when you're very bold, it takes notice. So I encourage everybody to be bold.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to wrap up my portion with one question that I wrote, and I want to just ask it of all of you, just minute, and we'll go to the audience. So my question is, again, directed toward the young folks in here. For those who just arrived, you may have heard my long intros because I really wanted to highlight the phenomenal work that all three are doing and the positions of leadership they are in. And I'd love for you to share in just a minute Like, what does it take to get to the levels you guys are? Analysis, thought, hard work. Give us specific traits. Playing less video games, perhaps, is another idea. Directing at a few, but okay, let me bring my kid back there. Anyway, I'll stop. Please go ahead, Zena. Zena, Sadia, Constantine.
What does it take? I mean, number one, it's not like I ever thought that I would get to the positions that I thought that I got to, and so some of it is God's grace, and I should say that first, right? I think when I think about the things that I've done, like find what you're passionate about and pursue it. This is what I just said earlier. I remember when Obama first came into office, I worked at a civic organization in Chicago called the Interfaith Youth Corps, and we worked really hard around national service. So we had this idea of national service is the point of entry for Muslim communities. So I worked with Dalia Makahed, and we joined, and we kind of tried to coordinate the Muslim community, MSA, MINA, like ISNA, around this campaign that the Obama administration was doing at that time called United We Serve. And I just learned so much from that, but I didn't know the answers, I didn't have the playbook, I just tried to coordinate and move the ball forward and represent us well. And so I think find the thing you're passionate about and find ways to pursue it. Be good to work with. I think that's the best compliment you can get. Sadia is really good to work with. But use every opportunity to learn. So I took the time at the State Department, and you have a degree from Georgetown, right, the School of Foreign Service. I didn't. So when I got to the U.S. State Department, I didn't know how it worked. I mean, I had to figure it out, and you only can really figure out that institution when you're in it in a way, because so much of the correspondence, the way that memos go up to the secretary, the way that, all of those things happens internally. It's not a book you can really study. So when you're in those opportunities, try to learn everything you can from them. Be curious. Be a bridge, not a bubble. I've already said that, I don't need to say it again, but I think always find ways to bridge, whether it's intergenerationally, whether it's between faiths, whether, whatever way you're doing it. Think about how, what the other person on the other side of the table also is gaining from this interaction with you or with your community, not just what you have to say or, what your cause is. And then I think for the elders in the audience, just give young people support to be in public service or to, do media or do journalism or, be the next Miss Marvel. I mean, I understand why traditional degrees and traditional occupations are really important, but I think, give our young people the space to want to do public service. I think it's really, really important.
So I co-sign everything just shared, but to build on that, I also want to take a moment to, there's some really remarkable young people in this audience. I'm looking straight at Menahel over here, who recently won an award for leadership in her elementary school in Oak Park. And we have Bushra Amiwala sitting in the back of the room, so I feel a little sheepish giving advice here when we have so many amazing young people in the audience. One thing I'll add that's a really big strength of our community is we have a lot of kids running around in this room right now. And this is a thing I've heard a lot about when you go to Muslim events. There's always children running around, which is great, because that's how you teach your children the importance of civic engagement. Zena's daughter is here, so you my little one's in the back hanging out, eating a cookie probably. But I think it's really important for us to continue to bring our girls, bring our children into these spaces. The first place where I saw people voting was here at MUC when I was a student. This used to be a polling station. I'm not sure if it still is, but I want, our community is very good about demonstrating how to be a good civically engaged American Muslim. So, I don't have so much advice as to say, we are products of this community, and I see that tradition is continuing on here. There's grandparents and parents and children that are all here on a Sunday rainy evening, waiting for dinner. So thank you all, and Faz, thanks for the question.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for all of your support, and all your family's support, and all of those things. But I think there's just, at its core, be fearless. Be absolutely fearless. Bush was nodding her head. At 18, right? You're first elected, youngest elected, is that right? In your area. Be fearless. Because it's not so that you have to know everything, and it's not so that you have to be perfect at everything, and you do not have to know every single policy and or every chemical formula that you may need to know for other positions. But for public service, or whatever you choose to do, know enough, but know how to build relationships. So be fearless in your relationships. Don't be afraid to be friends with someone you didn't think you were going to be friends with, because it happens all the time in government, and it's really important. Also be fearless in taking on things that nobody else will. So I have this saying in my house, and I started it when my son, 13 years ago, was bullied severely to the point of hospitalization and therapy and a bunch of things. And I was sitting in a community meeting, the community that I lived in at the time, and everybody was talking about how perfect and Mayberry-like it was. And I was like, really? It's not. So don't be afraid to say something that's not popular in a room where everybody is in consensus. It's okay. Because you know what happened that night after I got home at about 8:30 at night? I had 60 moms and dads call me saying, my child's being bullied too. So think about that. If I had not said that, we wouldn't address bullying in my community. I wouldn't have gotten, at that point, Governor Quinn to sign something into law around bullying. President Obama's executive committee, an executive order, may have not gotten all that it needed, and a bunch of things. So start locally, but be fearless and touch the sticky ball in the room. It's okay. You're gonna be fine. So that's my advice.
Great, thank you. And the younger generation folks, I think that gun rights is a sensible gun legislation is a huge issue. I've done a bunch of research on it, and we literally have solutions. So if anybody's interested, come talk to me afterwards. And MPAC, we're going to be doing work in this area. Environment is a huge issue if you're passionate about that. Imagine if American Muslims solve some of our biggest problems. We will be like profoundly accepted. It's not even just us, my own rights. It's solving America's problems. That's what it takes. So questions that